I'm sitting cross-legged in a chair that you're not supposed to sit cross-legged in. Bisexual for you. What's up, nerds? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie. If you're new here, I hope your day is going well. And today we're going to do another rant review type of thing. My last rant review was for Crave, linked up above. It was the feminist Twilight, as it was pitched to me, and it was anything but feminist, so go check that out. But today we're going to be doing a venture that could very well result in me quitting YouTube. But I have decided that I'm going to give my Patreon supporters kind of free reign on choosing my rant reviews, and I want to do more videos like this for you guys, where it's not necessarily just rant review. I want to do video discussions, things like that, and I want to give Patreon supporters kind of like the first crack at telling me what I'm going to do. So the options were either Deadly Education was meh, or Black Chalk is no, or I could have combined both. Black Chalk won, as you can see from the title of the video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we are going to be going over Black Chalk by Christopher J. Yates. This book kind of popped up in one of my live streams at some point where someone was like, we were talking about dark academia, and I've been just a slut for dark academia recently, and I basically heard from the majority of people that if you're looking for dark academia, to not read this. So I was intrigued, so you can say, because I happen to really enjoy finding out for myself why other people tell me not to read something, which is kind of counterintuitive if you think about it. But I wanted to read this and figure out why exactly this book was notoriously known to be bad. And I will tell you why that is the fact, because I did agree with the majority of people that I've heard talk about this book that this book was not good, and I'll tell you why. So let's do a brief kind of coverage over what dark academia is. I've already done a recommendation, my favorite dark academia books on this channel. Basically, it's a aesthetic that revolves around very intense studying and kind of like possible murders and just nefarious acts. The most accurate definition that I found was basically a knowledgeable vintage emo, kind of like that. So it's very much focused on the arts and the classics and very kind of spooky atmosphere and lots of turtlenecks and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So in Black Chalk, we do have a similar setting to that. So Black Chalk is about 6 friends in the 90s going to school at Oxford University, and they developed this game where the punishments for losing the game involve doing these dares that get increasingly more and more dangerous until one of them dies, basically. Here's the thing. Dark academia is hella pretentious, and I eat that shit up. I have a Shakespeare tattoo. Dark academia speaks to me on a molecular level, let's say. This book was marketed very strongly that if you liked The Secret History by Donna Tartt, you would like this book. The funny part about that is that I did not like The Secret History, but I also didn't like Black Chalk, and I can tell you why in this review, which is the whole point of this fucking video. Moving on. This book suffers from a completely different monster that The Secret History does. This book suffers from what I can only attribute is the male ego. Now I can tell that those fingers on the keyboard warriors are getting all cramped up from writing a thesis in my comment section right now for me saying that. But let me break it down for you a little bit more. The way this is told suffers specifically from the male gaze in a very, very particular way. This is told from alternating perspectives and timelines, where we start in the 90s and we're following a guy named Chad, and in the future timeline, we're following an unnamed narrator at the beginning of the book. And this unnamed narrator is a hermit. He doesn't leave his house. He's gripped by anxieties and fears that we don't really have any kind of idea where they came from, and he has several compulsions that are pretty much unexplained for most of the book. The dude is major damaged, basically. Going to the beginning of this story that the narrator in the future timeline is telling us, we follow this guy named Chad. He is a virgin. It is very relevant to the plot, and I'll get into a little bit of why later. But he is from New York going to Oxford, and he meets this guy named Jolyon. It's spelled Jolyon, and I'm going to pronounce it Jolyon because when I was looking at it, it annoyed me, and I want it to annoy you too. Jolyon is this devil-may-care character where he talks a lot of smack, and he actually says to Chad upon meeting him, "Why did your parents name you after a third world country?" So you can kind of get the gist of what we're going for here. Now, I should probably amend the male ego comment. This book suffers specifically from white, cisgendered, straight male privilege. The flaws in this book come directly from the fact that the main characters don't actually suffer consequences for any of their actions. And their fatal flaws are just their privilege. The fact that they have privilege. So let's go through these characters. So there's Chad from New York, like upper state New York farm boy virgin who basically becomes obsessed with Julian for unclear reasons. There's Mark, whose nickname in the book is Sleepy, because he's in fact sleepy, and that's literally his entire character development. And there's Amelia, who is the good girl, and if you want my opinion on Amelia, you can go watch my Why Are Characters Written Terribly video. I go over everything about why I don't like that character in that video. Not specifically like the actual character from Black Chalk, but why I don't like the good girl kind of trope. Don't like it at all. And then there's Jack, who is a ragingly internalized homophobic gay man. And then there's Dee, whose real name is Cassandra, but she goes by Dee because she told someone at some point that she was going to write 500 poems in her lifetime, and when she got to 500, she was going to commit suicide. And they call her Dee because 500, the Roman numeral for 500 is the letter D. And that's really the only reference to any classical, like, history in this book, other than a very offensive gay man bit character who drops Oscar Wilde quotes and French phrases for no reason. Yikes. These kids have next to no interest in learning. We really have no idea what their, like, studies involve, other than Amelia is a psychologist and they kind of look to her for, like, help on things mentally, but like not really. I don't know. It's very strange. And even though one of their friends has basically said, yes, I am going to commit suicide, they call her the Suicide Girl. That is her nickname. They don't really care. They don't care at all. It's very strange to me. And that brings us full circle back to Julian, what have you. At first, the book gives us the impression that Chad is the broken man in the future timeline, but it's actually Julian, which honestly wasn't surprising to me in the slightest. Book basically makes Julian like the Gary Sue of all the characters. He's definitely an unreliable narrator, but he also caused a lot of the stupid shit all of the characters get into, and he's really, really invested in this game that they play, and everybody has to participate and take their punishments except him. If you couldn't already tell, not a single one of these characters are fleshed out. They bandy about slurs and hate at each other, but they really have nothing in common. The game that they develop is monitored by these people in this like secret society called GameSock, and there's these referees, for lack of a better word, called shortest, middle, tallest. And it's a very surreal thing that I wasn't quite sure if it was supposed to be some sort of code or some sort of riddle that the author was like big braining into his story. Because in this instance, that surrealism doesn't fit for a dark academic thriller. Like books like Ninth House have supernatural elements, but they are grounded in the world building of the story, whereas this one would have been more something that I would expect from a book like S or House of Leaves, where you don't really know what's going on and you're not supposed to. Whereas this one, it just took me immediately out of the story that we had these people that we refer to by shortest, middle, tallest, even though they're actual people in the story. I don't know. That was the only part in the book that I was like, I don't fucking understand this. This is stupid. There was actually a lot of those points, actually. That was just one big one that I was like, I don't get that, I don't care. It also becomes established at some point that someone may be changing the story that the narrator is writing down, but we never actually figure out if that's true or not. So maybe this person that's changing the words is hiding the GameSock's people's identity. Don't know. Don't have a big enough brain for it. Don't really care. I also think that pretty much the only reason that those characters were even there to begin with is to try and keep these people in the game that they have no investment in at all. Makes a lot of sense, because the game, hella boring. Most of the characters just drop out because they don't want to play the game. And they have no reason to continue playing the game because all they did was open bank accounts and dump a whole bunch of money into this pot, and they could just walk away and just not get their money back. There's no repercussions from leaving the game. They also kind of establish at some points that there is an actual game with cards and dice that they play, but we never actually see that. We just get flashes to when someone needs to take their punishment, and it's never explained who lost, how they reacted when they lost, what matters in this game. Nothing about this premise where there's a game and then punishments is ever actually fully realized. And that means there's really no tension, no worry that someone's gonna lose and someone's gonna have to take the punishment. They're just already taking the punishment. It's like a glory, and it's just glorifying whatever they're having to do to take the to do during the punishment. It's just, I don't know. It's very strange, and the punishments don't make sense. They're all really lame, like really lame. And they start off with like Chad has to wear an Oxford scarf for a week. Cause, oh God, I'm going to Oxford in the 90s. Good God. And then moving on from like the scarf, Mark has to lose at trivia with a friend of his. Like intentionally. And then Chad, which who would have thought, actually gets really drunk and during a public speech basically tells a girl that likes him that she's okay enough to be the one that he would lose his virginity to. So basically the stakes are just not high enough for me to believe A, that these people care about this game or want to win it or have any reason to actually do any of these dares. Like they're just not, I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Once again, why does the book suffer from the male ego? That is because the whole plot line is hinged on the antagonistic relationship between Chad and Jolien and who sleeps with the female characters. Boy, did Amelia and Cassandra deserve better. It seems like the author knew that he couldn't write well-written female characters, so instead he just wrote all of the characters terribly. Like, Jolien literally says, I can have sex with whoever I want. And he doesn't care for either of the women particularly, but he does end up sleeping with both of them. Chad is hella possessive and creepy, despite having no relationship with either of these girls that have anything to do with wanting to possess them and make them his. And that Jolien has had them makes them, like, tainted in some way. And Jack is sexist and hella homophobic and definitely a closeted gay man, and it's not great. And then Mark is just Mark, which is weird because we're supposed to care about Mark. I'm not gonna go into real reasons why, but if you haven't already established something about the way the book goes, you might be able to figure out what Mark is doing here. Well, hey Mark. The other big thing about this book, where it suffers from just privilege, is none of the characters seem to have relatable issues. Most people would probably be a little concerned if one of their friends said, hey, I'm going to kill myself after I get to 500 poems. I don't know about y'all, but I would be highly concerned if someone said that to me. Most people wouldn't say, wow, I want to be an orphan instead of having 4 parents. And most people wouldn't make their friends do something that goes against their ethics and morals as part of a dare. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, oh, hey, like a TikTok where you hear a word and you have to throw something in the grocery store. Like that's, you know, that's dumb kid shit. But like making someone stand up and like support Margaret Thatcher because they hate her just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's not relatable. Basically, the answer to the question of why do I categorize this as the male gaze or the male ego is that the problems these characters seem to find incredibly oppressive and distinct are all things that only a very privileged person like a white straight guy would find oppressive and strugglesome. Strugglesome a word? I can't remember. Only a young privileged man would find that the worst thing that could happen to him is people finding out that he's a virgin pig farmer from upstate New York. Also, the stereotype of the closeted gay man being mean to boys that are gay is just not great. It's very boys will be boys mentality. Also, the fact that every single woman is described to an inch of her just detail in just really disgusting ways, whereas the men are not described at all. You get what I'm saying? And then again, and with Amelia, like her entire background is something to do with her dad and how he was a minor, and she has no internal struggles of her own, only struggles that a man has brought into her life. Also, she marries Jack, which I'm just like, why? Why did we add this? And Cassandra, I think, does die. Like, it's very, like, not quite sure. It's vague, very vague. She was torturing Chad? No, she was torturing Jolien by marrying Chad, and then like, I don't know. I don't get it. It seems like the book was trying to say that these people are so intrinsically tied together that they are manipulating each other for decades, and I just cannot see that. They're basically just all assholes, and they've got this act where they're like, poor woe is me, upper middle class white kids in the 90s going to a really nice college. I'm so misunderstood. And I just have to ask the middle-aged white people in the back to read the fucking room. So I want to compare this to one of my favorite dark academia books, If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Interestingly enough, this was written by a woman. Not necessarily saying a man cannot write dark academia. I'm just pointing out that her name is M.L. and his name is full on Christopher. Interesting thing about the publishing world right there. This follows about 7 kids at a very liberal arts college where they are part of this extremely elite Shakespeare group. Hella fucking nerdy, I know, I ate this shit up. The way that this book goes is that there are roles that these characters have been typecasted into the entire time they've been at this school, and it's actually affected their personality. The similarities between this book and Black Chalk is there is a death and there is also a back and forth timeline where you're getting what happened in the past from a technically unreliable narrator who's telling to a retired police investigator what actually happened. The stakes in this book are much higher because these people actually have passion for what they're doing, passion for what they're learning, and passion for each other. So there's a lot of background information that you get on each character. There's a lot of background information about why the things that happen in this book happen and what relates these people to each other over the course of several decades. The atmosphere also plays a big part in this book. You're in this very remote college setting. There's a lot of stress from that. I wouldn't necessarily say the atmosphere of a school has to be overshadowing the actual plot of the book, but it definitely doesn't do anything for Black Chalk that it's set at Oxford. We don't really get any scenes, we don't really get any acknowledgement that it's a school, whereas this very much has that pressure to succeed, to be perfect, and Black Chalk just doesn't do that, and I feel like that's like a dark academia focus. You know what I'm saying? Plenty of people have reviewed this and said they couldn't really connect to it because it has so much Shakespeare in it, but at the same time, I feel like this is kind of a building block for what I find interesting in dark academia. It has really interesting characters that have extreme motivations for what they're doing. It has the excessive atmosphere plotline, and just stakes. It has stakes. Why can't you stakes? I'm hungry now. Fuck. I just feel like even if you're not a Shakespearean fan, you might very well be able to understand the motivations the characters have in that book, whereas the motivations in Black Chalk are just like embarrassingly mediocre. So personally, if you're going to write a dark academia book, you have to focus on 3 things. So basically that's the whole point of the video that we're getting to. 1, the characters must have motivations that relate to their backstories. They need to be outside of just one perspective of the world, if you're seeing what I'm saying. The characters also have to have some sort of passion for learning. If you're going to be setting in a dark academic setting, there should be some sort of academic part of the story that we're focusing on. And number C, the school or establishment that the people are at should probably play some sort of role instead of being just the setting. Not necessarily a pivotal point in this, but I definitely had a complaint about that in Black Chalk, that it didn't feel academic enough. It's low potatoes. Small potatoes. I'm hungry now. I'm gonna wrap this up. Basically, I'm making the argument that a dark academic book should be character driven and focus on what the characters are feeling rather than what the plot is telling them to do. They should be part of the story, basically, instead of just kind of going through the motions. The relationships between these characters in Black Chalk do not matter. The connections these people made have no real effect on this game that they're playing. Julian spends a lot of the book trying to basically tell the audience that he's a good person, and at least compared to Chad, and it just doesn't work. Like, you can't tell us that the main character is a good person when all you've shown is that he is definitely not a good person. And he gets away with literally everything. He does end up basically becoming a hermit, but that's never established as to why. He definitely had several years in between the game and the point where he starts telling the story that he was living a seemingly happy life, but it just... Most of this book was just me doing this. I enjoyed this book in the sense that it was fun to read in a I don't want to gouge my eyes out kind of way. It was more of a, this could have been a lot better if we had maybe had like one woman read it. Any woman. If you've gotten to this part of the video, go ahead and leave in the comments down below the song that you've been listening to on repeat lately. I have been listening to Prisoner by Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa, and I've been loving it a lot. I'm gonna just go ahead and wrap this up now. I'm gonna go now, guys. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Bye!